I went looking. I don't know why I went looking, but I did. Everyone knows about Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. It even has its own 3DS re-release, and a very large portion of its fan base also knows the phrase, "been drowned." If you don't, just look it up. This may not make much sense otherwise. I am a pretty big Legend of Zelda fan. I love the games, though they're hard as nails. My particular favorite, and many others, was Ocarina of Time. I got a Nintendo 64 recently from a friend. I should already sound familiar. It was your standard gray with a purple controller, and he had lost all of his games except for good old Conker's Bad Fur Day. That game can get awfully rage-tastic though, so I decided to go on the hunt for some games online. Not always your best choice monetary-wise, but you get some good ones every now and then. I caught a couple good games, including Majora's Mask for $25. I know, what the hell, right? But that made me think of that famous creepypasta, Been Drowned. So I spent the better part of a day looking it up. I found some pretty interesting things, including a guy who supposedly sold the broken haunted game to that poor college kid. And that game hadn't been the only one. He swore he had another game for sale. Convinced this was a stupid prank, I bought the game for about $2 and gave the guy a P.O. box address. Because, you know, I'm not that stupid. The game arrived the next day, which was really surprising. It must have cost the guy a fortune, but when I asked, his username was apparently disabled. The game I received bore extremely similar details to the cartridge described in Been Drowned. Gray with no sticker, and the simple word Ocarina, marked across in a messy scrawl. I felt like I was living in a movie, though it hadn't yet occurred to me that it might be real. The game ran smoothly. There were no save files, which was mildly disappointing, though when I selected the first slot I was unable to change the character's name. Link was all it could be, which I was mostly fine with. I think it just gave me my first misgivings. The game played as awesomely as I remember it. It was entirely the same for most of the game, right up to that great Deku tree. When I got inside, the graphics glitched. Let's face it, you knew this was coming. Shit got weird. I lost the ability to swing my sword, and the background music turned into a single blaring tone. It would rise and fall like a pulse that seemed to go throughout the entire tree. There were no enemies. As I continued playing, it felt like I could hear the swaying of a tree, but whenever I paused, the sound would continue. I live in the city. There are no trees anywhere near me. The first major chest I got to held the Ocarina of Time, which is obviously wrong. By now, I was convinced that, at least, this was an extremely elaborate prank. I couldn't play or select the ocarina. The next major chest was more uncomfortable. I opened it to the words, "You received Zelda's head," and the celebratory song played backwards. There were no graphics for her head, thank God. It was only strange pixelation. I don't know how to explain what came over me after this. I should have stopped. I could have stopped. It was weird, demented, twisted, but that goddamn note, that stupid tone, it was almost hypnotic. It was all I could hear in my head. When I found Zelda's head, Link suddenly turned, the screen for when he's learning a song suddenly showing up. I didn't recognize it or the song that played, though it was familiar. I stared at it forever. Down, A, right, down, A, right. A low note followed by a high. It was the Song of Time backwards. Realizing that was a shock to me, and I was almost manically delighted. When I played it, I was teleported to the cave, the boss room, with Goma. The graphics on the walls reminded me of Dot Hack, a game that once gave me nightmares. They were just blocks of pixelated, torn textures. But instead of Goma, Ganondorf was there. He was kneeling and shaking, as though he were crying. He was holding Zelda's body, though where her head should have been was instead a 2D sheet of torn, pixelated textures. Text appeared, some of the letters capitalized and other letters lowercase, where they shouldn't have been, like magazine clippings. "I'm sorry." My only option was Ben drowned, and in my heart I knew something was wrong. Up until now, I've said nothing of the tiny blue fairy Navi. I never thought to even call her, and suddenly she was there. Instead of, "Hey!" or "Listen!" an extremely crackled MIDI track played that sounded like the gain had been turned up too high. I can't be sure, but I think she said hate. More text appeared. "It's your fault. You won't let go. Stop tormenting him. Let him rest." Ganondorf continued crying, and more text appeared. "I drowned my son." And Navi, again with her distorted, strange MIDI word, "Hate. Your fault. You created him." And finally, "I'm sorry. Ben drowned." I don't know what happened after that. I'm not even sure I recall my own name. My room is destroyed, as though by a bat. The game's in pieces, and the Nintendo 64 is melted. I have severe shakes, and I'm constantly drenched. The carpet sounds like a swamp floor. I can't open my door. I burn my hands when I try. I can't cry. I only laugh. Why was I scared? I woke up with blood on my hands, but I have no idea if it's mine. My computer wasn't destroyed. Ben wants me to continue this. I'm not sad. If I cry, Daddy will drown me.